able to see? Okay, in that case, I will do that. Thank you.
Cheers. To the call, can you hear us loud and clear? The call, can you hear us okay? I think you are on mute. If you
I am, yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you.
Very good.
The colleagues of Yemen already connected?
We ran a test
Yes.
and they're okay. Yes.
Perfect. So happy to hear that you're connected. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And everyone from the Sun Movement, we're just getting few people connected. Thank you for your patience. We'll get started shortly.
You'll suggest we start, as we have quite a few colleagues online, and we also have our Samu coordinator, who has a busy schedule, so perhaps we can start.
If there's anyone having trouble connecting, I'll...
Yes. Perhaps with some administrative instructions. Arlen from the Sun Secretariat is online. If you have any issues connecting with your audio, please do not hesitate to let us know. And we have a chat box. So if you would like at any point during the webinar to share your questions, please use the chat box. And then we will have a dedicated Q&A question and answer session. And we will be able to read all your questions and answer them during the webinar. So do not hesitate to send your questions at any time during the presentation. Let us know when everyone can hear us. So let's start. Thank you very much.
Sure, give it one more minute to get the last minute connections, and then we'll be good to go.
Thank you everyone for your patience, and welcome to the webinar of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement on country approaches to financial recognition. Before we go into the webinar and the presentations, we would like to listen to Gerda Verburg, our Sun Movement coordinator, who is online, who would like to share a warm welcome with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and it's great to see that so many people from countries, Sun Movement member countries, are able to connect and participate in this important webinar. Welcome to our Sun country focal points and network participants for this webinar on financial tracking for nutrition. I look forward to hear more about the different ways in which some countries have found ways of tracking their financial allocations for nutrition, because financing knowledge is indeed a power. So please ask all the questions you may have, and for those who have already experiences, please share your experiences and your perspectives with other countries, because that is the spirit of the Sun Movement: sharing, learning, and cross-inspiring with each other. But let me also say a few words about the COVID-19 virus, or the coronavirus. I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and keeping up the good spirit. The pandemic has the potential of reversing some major nutrition gains made over the past years, as we are trying our best to cope. But I hope, even in the face of this, that we do not drop the ball on nutrition. At the contrary, let us focus on nutrition as the best building block to create and maintain people's resilience. Of course, starting with a focus on little children and their mothers, and a focus on the first 1,000 days. Although our team at the Sun Movement Secretariat is working from home, like many of you have to do as well, they are on hand to provide you the support you may need these days. So don't hesitate to reach out to them, and I know you're not hesitating, but we are there for you. The networks are there for you to provide you the support you may need these days. We will be counting on you at country level, and you can count on us. That is the Sun Movement power. That is the power of we. So with these words, I'd like to open these webinars. Once more, I would like to welcome you and wish you a very, very fruitful webinar. And once again, don't hesitate to ask questions. Don't hesitate to share your experiences. And don't forget, we are there for you. Also, and have a very constructive and fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for your warm welcome. And I would like also to welcome the presenters on the call. We have our colleague Karim Alada from Yemen, Planning and Liaison Specialist, who is who's joining us from Yemen, from the Yemen Sun Secretariat, and Sherwat from MQSUN. So after the warm welcome from Gerda, I would like to just go through the agenda of the webinar. We will have some introductions. We will have thematic presentations and discussions. We will also have time to share experiences from some countries. And feel free, as I said before, to ask any questions you have on the presentation, but also to share your experience from some countries. And we will have a question and answer and some next steps. So if I can perhaps go through quickly the webinar objectives. What we hope to achieve is that this webinar will be an opportunity for peer-to-peer learning, define cost, time, and involvement of stakeholders in developing country-led financial tracking systems for nutrition. We also hope that this webinar will be an opportunity to identify best practices for engaging non-traditional stakeholders, with, for example, planning and finance or parliamentarians. We will do different kinds of financial tracking systems and also hear the feedback from countries who may have used these systems. And finally, we will see how to engage new stakeholders from the beginning or track innovative forms of financing. Now, go to the presentation. Karima, are you there? Our colleague from Yemen.
Yes.
Let me pull up your presentation. 1 minute, and I will be able to share screen. You're Yemen. There you go. Karima, at any point you would like me to change and move to the next slide, just say next slide, please.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for all of you for hosting and listening to our experience in financial tracking for nutrition. Actually, as you see in the first slide, we can go through. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, we go through these points: the specific objectives, the stakeholder engagement, the approach and the process, the organization challenges, and the conflict-affected country. Next, please. Okay. I think as many of the countries in Sun movement, Yemen has this goal or main objective is having an overview over the nutrition activities. Actually, Yemen, as a conflict-affected state, we have this problem that we don't have this one list to know what's going on nutrition. So our goal is to have this overview of all the activities running in the country. Then we can analyze this list and to evidence-based decision making. We collect the data from 5 main sectors: health, agriculture, fisheries, education, and protection, and also the WASH. Actually, each sector has its own objective. Like as you see here, the agriculture, they focus on the rural community and especially on women. Next. Engage the stakeholders. Here in Yemen, we have the government, the UN, the NGOs, the donors, and also we have business and CSOs. So at the first stage, we just try to make it short and to make the list as we can move with these stakeholders. It is the government with the 5 sectors. I indicated before: the health, agriculture, fisheries, education, social protection, and WASH. We try to connect with the UN because, Yemen in a crisis, political crisis, so the government's fund is almost zero. So all the fund comes from the UN and the donors. So we're trying to communicate with them all the time and get the financial from them, the data. This year, actually, we have planned to engage new stakeholders as the business sector has its great effect on Yemenis, and they have many activities. So this time we are going to engage the business sector by engaging the Yemeni Food Bank. It is it's kind of CSOs, but the chairman there are the main or leading entities in the private sectors. CSOs, we are going to engage them this time through collecting the activities implemented by the clusters. As you know, the clusters, the main or direct implementers there are the NGOs. So we are trying to collect the activities and them to the government and the business. Next. Yes, I think it is so difficult to engage the stakeholders, especially when it's come to circumstances like Yemen and a political crisis and conflict. So what we are trying is to build a collaborative partnership with the stakeholders. We are trying to maintain an emphasis on the mutual responsibility and the collective results that all should share and work together. We also share this message with them all the time and in all meetings, and we try to make this, to build the trust. It is the main thing that we should do at this time. You know, the state is fragmented, it is weak. So what we are trying is to build the trust between the stakeholders and the mutual responsibility. And this be also maintained by acknowledging the mandates of the stakeholders in the projects and role in the implementation process. And also the main thing that we are trying also to maintain a constant, positive and recent communication with the partnership. We invite them in all the activities and meetings and workshops. We also highlight this kind of communication that we build the trust and the collaborative partnership with them. Please. When it comes to process. Okay, thank you.
No, we can hear you. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. When it comes to the process, I think it is so simple here in Yemen. We are just trying to send official letters at the beginning for all the stakeholders. This time, as I indicated before, we targeted the business sector and the CSOs. We also hold a refresher workshop. And time, as you know, because of coronavirus, we can't do it, but we will sit with each sector privately ad hoc meetings, and we will remind them of our objectives and the new objectives for this year about the business and CSOs engagement. So this is what we are trying to do this time. We'll not have the refresher workshop, but we will have ad hoc meeting, or we will have individual meetings with the sectors one by one. Then we, after we collect the data from the different sectors, we conduct review sessions with each sector. We make sure that all the data are correct and it makes sense. Then we have all the activities in one list. We revise them for the last time before sharing it with SUN Secretariat. We share it with the SUN Secretariat. Then if they have any questions or clarifications, we try to respond to and share also the sectors and the stakeholders in responding to the questions. Next. To the result using, we are actually presenting the results in the steering committee meeting and the Sun UN network meeting. We're trying to present and the view of the role of sector and the activities that we all have and what we should do and if there is gaps or anything like this. We also use it in some Yemen bulletins every year. For the ministries, they usually share the results with the higher authorities in their sectors. For future planning, actually, the results will be very important for Ministry of Planning and the authorities of coordination, the international cooperation to use it for the nutrition planning. Next. Challenges. Most of us have different kind of challenges according to the circumstances. And here in Yemen, it takes us 2 to 3 months to collect. Excuse me, can you go to the next slide, please? The chat. Okay. So as I indicated before that in Yemen, it takes a little bit time, 2 to 3 months to collect the data and discuss it with the stakeholders. And the main challenge is that sometimes the government entities and the departments, they are not widely open to share the data. Sometimes they have new activities that they're not open about it. But most of the time we negotiate, we talk, and as I said before, I think we have this trust now, and it is easier this time than before to have the data from the government. For the UN and the NGOs, although it is so difficult, not because of the transparency problem, no, because they are too busy, especially in Yemen, a conflict-affected state with many emergencies around the country. So they are too busy to help us, use the data collection template. It is too much information sometimes for them to use it. So it takes us a lot of time, and we have to wait every time to have this data from the UN and NGOs. The problem in government, because of the political crisis and the war that we have right now in country, that the most information systems are shut down because due to the lack of operational budget, we don't have it. So the fund usually comes from the UN and the donors, and so they are the main source of data, and we have to rely on this for maybe until the end of the conflict. Next. On the last slide.
Would you like me to go to the results? Keep the results, or would you like to look at this slide?
No,
okay.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the last one. Yeah, the conflict-affected country. I think we have this. It is like a different country with a conflict-affected circumstances. What we have is a state and government fragmentation, and this will cause extra and double efforts. We do in Sana'a, we try to do it again in Aden, and we do it in the sectors here, in the ministries in Sana'a, and we repeat it again in Aden. So every time we have to do that, it is a double effort for us. The important thing is the depoliticizing of nutrition. We have tried to reach this important message to our partners in UN and donors that, okay, we should work and try to depoliticize the nutrition and work together on this for people, not for the government or the state. So I think we have succeed. We have succeeded in this effort. The last thing is the Sun Yemen Secretariat, the reality, because, we have these stakeholders within the country, and we have to emphasize on the importance of working on the technical level. We're not working on the political level. So this is a very challenge that we face all the time because of the state and government fragmentation, and we have to emphasize on the neutrality of the secretariat, and we work on the technical level with the stakeholders, whether at the national or international level, and we have to try to reach out to people and the most affected people, and try to help them, apart from the political issues. I think this is the presentation, and you are welcome for any questions later. Thank you so much.
Let me thank you for this great presentation. You have walked us through not only the process to collect data in Yemen, but also the challenges that you are facing with your colleagues to work in a conflict-affected state. We really thank you also for being connected. We know it's not easy. So perhaps we can, I think we have received a few questions to the chat box. Perhaps we can go to the questions while we have you online. Freddie, can you read us some of the questions you have received for Karima, please?
Yeah, of course. The first question is, has this exercise contributed to better donor, partner, and government coordination, avoiding duplication of interventions, which we see in so many countries? And does there exist a memorandum of understanding or a code of conduct for cooperation between the donors and government? Important for avoiding fragmentation.
I have to repeat, it's a long question, but let us know if we need to repeat it for you.
I think it's fine. The answer is, in Yemen, because of the political crisis that we have right now, actually the main actors in the country are the UN and the donors. So the government are like the coordinators of these activities. So when we have this with the focal point from 6 sectors, and these focal points working on collecting the data from the UN and the donors. So one person collecting the information, he knows very well that he will not, duplicate the same activity. So, for example, in agriculture, in wash, in education, he knows very well that this activity that he has in his own ministry is the same one in the UN, in UNICEF, for example, or in WHO or FAO. So they know very well that these activities are not duplicated. Because the main donors and the main funder and financiers of the activities are the UN, so we usually review the activities with them. So they know that, okay, these activities are ones available in Yemen and they are not repeated. If they, for example, if we have one activity and they think it is the same like this one, they tell us what's the difference and what we should do. So I think having focal points who are technical specialized in this sectors, and they know very well the activities implemented in their sectors, helps to avoid the duplications and any kind of problems in this field. Thank you.
Is there any more questions from the chat box?
Not yet.
Is there a comment perhaps that any of the participants online would like to share with Karima on presentation? Just yourself, if you're muted, if you'd like to share a comment or ask a question directly. We can then leave some time for later. do not hesitate again to write your questions through the chat box to my colleague Freddie, who will read them. Karina, thank you again. I hope you can stay, and perhaps we can pass.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we can pass now to the next presentation. Richard, are you on?
Hi, can you?
Yes, I can. Let me just pull up your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We are managing this remotely, so it's not always easy to connect. Just share it. Here you go. Richard, if I can do a quick introduction. Richard, our colleague from MQ Sun, who has supported different countries over the years in providing technical assistance on financial tracking. Please listen to the presentation, and then we will have time later for questions. Richard, over to you. Thank you.
Very much, and thank you very much to the Secretariat as well for the opportunity to let me speak and share experiences in some, but also to look more specifically at subnational financing for nutrition. So then next slide, please. An outline about the presentation. So to start off with, I wanted to provide a background about some support to the Secretariat and countries on subnational government investments in nutrition, the guidance we've provided on this, and provide a bit of an overview about how this was applied in Somalia, and as well as that to look at some of the complementary analysis was conducted in addition to the budget analysis that aided the policy relevance of the data for the stakeholders, different stakeholders, and provide some general conclusions. Great. Okay, so this first slide is just the growing focus on subnational governments and their financing for nutrition. I think they're going to share the presentation, but in the notes there's a link to a document produced for the Secretariat on the growing role of subnational governments in nutrition. And these figures are included within that report. So it looks at the sort of total government expenditure by subnational governments. And obviously countries that are highly federalized, so Somalia, Ethiopia, and others, where you expect a large amount of to happen at the subnational level, and that captured by the national governments because subnational governments can raise their own revenue, or they're given block transfers or block grants that are not specific to nutrition. I provided the table on the right to kind of highlight some countries. I think Kenya is a good example, where government expenditure by subnational governments is quite low, around sort of 15%. But 15% can actually be, a lot of it can be focused on nutrition. So in Kenya, the health sector funding is actually devolved, and the county governments are fiscally responsible for delivering services. So understanding subnational governments funding, you're actually missing quite a big portion of that. See, a lot of the focus has been tracking investments at the national level, but it's just that here that subnational governments can actually be key. So to have awareness and understanding about those different government and their funding is critical in some cases. Thank you. In this regard, the importance of decentralization. I think Kenya and in 2015 the decision of the health sector. For example, at the moment is Malawi, which is evolving, and then I know sort of and Cameroon as well with the current centralization process. So a number of countries where this is a growth trend to devolve responsibilities to subnational governments. So this asked MQ Sun Plus to produce a guidance help focal points and other stakeholders about conducting some of this analysis. Documents produced, and then there's 2 clickable links to access those. It's really to help understanding about the role of subnational governments and whether it's worth investigating or whether getting involved in tracking funding nutrition is important. So this provides an overview about advice, look at the roles and responsibilities of different governments, guidance to help with that. And then the guidance note looks very much more at the types of analysis. So obviously, there are 2 main areas. The first is a focus. So maybe this is more useful for a national or federal government to understand investments across all different types of subnational governments. So this could be analysis of budgets or specific programs across all governments in a sort of a light touch way, just understanding the investment landscape, or be looking at more narrow focus. So maybe specific governments would like their own analysis in greater detail, to looking at how the budget relates to plans and how budgeting relates to expenditure, disbursements, and actual outputs and outcomes. So I think the narrow focus, there are a couple of good examples. So the one example from UNICEF in Pakistan is looks at one specific province, and brings work, I think in 2013 or 14, looked at a few subnational units in Uganda and Nepal. So this provides a guide of different types of analysis that are possible. And all different countries have different situations or needs about what type of analysis they want. So this guide note looks at those in more detail. Please view them, and very happy to have comments on them and whether they proved helpful. Just another question, Karim. The guidance notes, there's clickable links, so they're publicly available on the MQ Sun Plus website, and they're there. I think just to focus very much on some of this. So, until the federal government was going through developing their national nutrition plan and looking to cost it. So, as part of interest in understanding their own investments in nutrition, that could be categorised through the budget. However, a bit of discussion about the usefulness of just looking at the federal government. Somalia, the constitution mandates significant fiscal decentralisation. So states have their own powers to raise revenue, taxes. So the government is really responsible for Mogadishu capital and the foreign affairs. Unless you want to look at financial nutrition in Mogadishu and the surrounding areas, you need to get state government funding. The idea was to do analysis to look at state government investment as well. So the point, and when they're developing when they were doing the plans, they understand a bit more about states financing for nutrition. So that was the idea then, was to broaden the analysis out. So for the previous guidance, the idea was to have a broad analysis looking, focus on budget analysis across the federal government and 5 states. And I'm just to clear, Somaliland was categorised as a state, although it does consider itself an independent nation. Did not get into trouble like that. So great. Next slide, please. So this is from the analysis itself. Just looked at the national, just looked at budget documents from the different countries, and it did involve, I think, Prima looked at the different stages and processes of discussing different line ministries. So in this case, the analysis just looked at the budget documents and focused on that, and it aided analysis was possible because the World Bank has provided quite a lot of support to the different states to help their public financial management systems, and the systems are all the same and classified. Lines are classified very similarly. So do analysis completely across the different governments. The level of disaggregation did to look at specific spending on nutrition, more focused on sensitive. So while the public financial management system enabled analysis, there were some limitations there in terms of data quality. Outside the analysis, we provided some guidance on next steps for the focal points in terms of improving the analysis, whether that be better coordination or discussions with different federal or state level, and also kind of improve the quality of budget data in the future years. In terms of the analysis itself, we looked at categorizing both government's own investments, domestic public investments, and government total, so including aid on budget. So this pie is quite informative because it shows, whilst an important finance for nutrition, both Somaliland and Puntland are kind of far in excess of the funding by those governments is higher. So it highlights why it was very important in Somalia to look at state government investments as well. Obviously, if you look at some of the newly formed states, such as Southwest or Jubaland, levels of investment there are very low, and I'll go into some of the reasons why that might be the case in a bit. Next. Oh, sorry, go back one. Can we go back? I just as well as this. Sorry. So yeah, as well as this sort of analysis in these pies, we also looked at some of the issues around analysis actual, so some of the challenges with disbursements, mission rates, and sort of this where the funding was. So it was just looking at these pies. There was a whole range of different types of analysis we provided to inform some of the sort of challenges and focus of nutrition financing. Thanks. Next slide. So sort of complementing analysis, I think Karima highlighted this in the case of Yemen. Donor funding or aid funding is a significant investment in nutrition. To complement the analysis in Somalia, we also tracked aid funding to the different subnational as well. It is possible through the aid management platform by the Ministry of Planning. In a sense, this was to the budget analysis because a lot of aid is budget. So what we did is we tracked sort of nutrition sensitive funding through the aid management platform, and the level of funding through domestic public resources, taxes and tax, and as well, and looked at sort of US per terms as well. So again, this is sort of insight into terms of where the whole financing landscape around nutrition, not just on budget itself, but we'll look at where funding is going in the country. So there's a kind of a complementary piece of analysis. Next slide. And then I think before I get to some of the challenges around, I guess, main elements from the data above, the significant investment aid compared to domestic public resources, but also the variance between spending in some of the states as opposed to others like Somaliland and Puntland. Data in more detail and wide analysis and look at ranges of newly formed states in terms of their ability to raise revenue. So the federal Somaliland and Puntland have large ports and are able to raise taxes through these ports. Newly formed states don't have a port and are finding to raise revenue themselves, hampering because of the fiscal space and because the priorities around security. The ability to invest on nutrition is very low, and there's limited ability to raise revenue. The money they do have is very much focused on key functions of government and security rather than nutrition. Analysis looked at some of the key reasons behind some of the data. So I think it wasn't just the budget data in itself, but it was this wider analysis that proved useful. Next slide. So feedback. from the focal points, the feedback was very positive. And before, we sort of provided some guidance alongside the budget data around steps that they could take with it. And I think it highlighted to them the importance of subnational investment in nutrition. And I think and cost the national nutrition plan that it be not silo in terms of the government. There needs to be in collaboration with state governments and get their to also be on board with the nutrition plan. So hopefully this first step in the budget analysis was useful for those coordination processes and developing the nutrition plan. The guidance around improving the quality of budget data. So I believe that will lead to, I guess, more discussion about understanding nutrition and improving either with line ministries or improving the Ministry of Finance's reporting of budget data. They've also, like DFID, have said that this analysis was useful to them to understand the disaggregated funding geographically and states are funding nutrition and the differences, and helpful for their own kind of decision making. This kind of in the subnational element has proved quite informed and relevant to a global audience, so it's going to be used as a case study within the report this year, which has a specific focus on equity. It shows the sort of power in being able to understand funding in more detail and where it's going. Thanks. Next slide.
Another slide, Richard. Sorry.
Yeah, the conclusions. Just a few conclusions. So I think countries, as I've outlined in the first slide, looking at the subnational level can be really significant, important to understand, and on the type of analysis you want to do, whether that's sort of a broad approach or whether you're interested in looking at subnational governments or want to undertake their own sort of analysis. And it might be about tracking funding, but it might be looking at how it links to outputs and outcomes and how it links to plans as well. So there's a broad range of, and hopefully the guidance, broad range analysis is possible. Guidance that helps that. And then the example of a sort of a broader approach. And I think case study shows sometimes the budget analysis data in itself might not be as itself. So I think being able to complement it with wider analysis can strengthen the meaning or the importance of the data. Somalia is a good example there where this has been done and has proved more useful than the specific budget training itself was. Said above, there was with the quality of budget data, but hopefully as a first step, the focal points and wider stakeholders have found this work informative to aid next steps in terms of the national nutrition plan and costings, etc. And some example where it wasn't needed to have a perfect fund management system, like in Peru often heralded the good examples that you track nutrition very well there. But actually, no, you don't have those structures in Somalia. It's useful to do this analysis. It's another good lesson that you don't necessarily need a national nutrition plan. You don't need it costed to be able to track budgets and have informative results from. Somalia is a good case for that as well. Analysis are relevant not for every country, not just some of the practice examples that are always given. Thank you very much for your time.
Richard, it's been a really interesting presentation, particularly the case of Somalia, and thank you also for highlighting how the budget analysis, financial tracking can help improve coordination with line ministries and influence decision making. And thank you for sharing the guidance documents. This presentation will be shared together with the presentation of the colleagues from Yemen and presentations of the colleague from Nepal in this webinar, we will share everything on the Sun website, including links and resources that you will be able to access later, and you will find. I hope you will find them useful. We have received a few questions in the chat box. Ready?
Yes.
For Richard or Karima, please.
I will start with this question. How much funding was on and off budget and on and off government plans, and how did you deal with this? A second question is asking, has the TA in Somalia and the financial tracking exercise increased the government accountability in nutrition, or are there any other effects of the exercise?
Sorry, I got the first question. You might have to say the second one to me again. In terms of an off budget, I think obviously we looked at aid from the analysis, and aid tracking was done separately. In terms of off budget, this could be a challenge. We didn't focus on some of the, I guess, more new analysis about the challenges of state governments reporting to the budget, and whether that be fund they receive, either revenue streams that they don't report through government. I guess that's more, from an outside perspective, that's more difficult to track. As I said, this analysis was sort of, I guess, a first step to look more holistically across state governments and their importance in tracking nutrition. But certainly this has been a challenge for newly formed states in terms of their ability to function as a government with being newly formed and having a lack of capacity and challenges around financial management. So yes, I can imagine that not fund might be funded through, might be on budget. This wasn't something we specifically focused on in the analysis, but this is something. I think the Balochistan example from Pakistan, I think, I'm not sure if we're able to chat, but that was really good in terms of looking at focus on a particular province and subnational unit and some of the challenges they have in linking, look at plans, linking it to budgeting and some of the outcomes and outputs and outcomes. So I think what you could do is maybe focus more on, and another piece of analysis that focus more on one specific state and some of these wider challenges around funding, utilization, and some of these public financial management issues, and that specific piece of analysis in itself. Sorry, I missed the second question.
Had Somalia and the financial tracking exercise increased government accountability in nutrition, or are there any effects of the exercise?
I think that's, as someone who provides technical assistance, I think that's difficult for me to say. As I said, providing the data analysis to the focal point, I think it is the awareness of its involvement in financing nutrition, and that the nutrition can't be done in isolation by the federal government. It needs to be done in collaboration with different states. So I think obviously this work was done in late 2018, and I know last year the federal government was looking very much at developing the National Nutrition Plan and costing it. I'm afraid I can't answer the more specific details about whether it's kind of led to more involvement by state governments and accountability. Hopefully goes on, this budget analysis helped in some ways.
Question, Freddie.
The third one, are budget codes programmatic classifiers for nutrition in the sectors, for example, in sectors and agriculture?
In the case of Somalia, there are what's out is project descriptions. So with each of the budgets and state governments, they have each of the different line ministries. Notifications under that are project descriptions. So they looked at those kind of project descriptions and used that to classify whether they were nutrition sensitive or specific I outlined above that it was very difficult with some project descriptions to be able to classify those that were specific, and then using kind of code that before that this work was guided by the Sun Secretariat's guide on classifying the sort of three-step process. So after the lines were identified, and then in collaboration with the focal to identify which ones were sensitive and specific, and obviously look at the specific element. So there were no, I guess, programmatic classifiers, but the ministerials and the project descriptions very much helped in this, and I think that's analysis. The more detail you have in terms of the different budget lines, being able to split out the programs and projects in more detail. I think in previous where we talked about kind of pro-based budgeting, linking budgets to outcomes and outputs and outcomes. So obviously types of budgets help, and Mali is a good example where they've started looking at management in that way, although it's not perfect. I think program-based budgeting does help with these type of analysis, project and program-based budgeting.
Richard, I'm not sure if there are any more questions through the chat box. Anyone like to ask a question on the presentations? You can just unmute yourself. I know for Richard or for some secretariat as well.
One question.
Please, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Ghulam.
Where you're from?
Bangladesh.
Yeah, just to speak closer to the microphone, a bit louder, because we cannot hear you very well.
The thing is, actually, I wanted to know during the Sun Yemen presentation, we see that in the process they collected data and review, and with the each set of data with Sun focal persons and government officials. So the question is how they weighted the data from different sectors. Say, for example, say health, differentiations also like specific and sensitive, culture or fisheries or education. How they weight the data, plotting the.
Richard, will you be able to answer this question?
To Karima, I think. I think it'd be
Karima, you see online? You're online, but we cannot hear you.
Hello?
You can hear you. Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please repeat the question.
Karim, the question was around how you approached identifying specific and sensitive spending in Yemen, and the types of weighting that you employed. That was for others. I think that was the basic point.
Yeah, in Yemen, we haven't applied the weighting at all till now. In identifying sensitive and specific interventions, we have, in the jobs, we explain it to the partners from different sectors that the specific interventions are the interventions of Ministry of Health. So most of them that they are direct to, cure and help the malnutrition community is the direct and these specific interventions. Other interventions introduced by the sectors like the agriculture, the water, education, and so on. So these sectors.
Hello.
I lost you. I think the question may have been Karima? I'm from Yemen, so.
Second, we're getting a bad signal from there. I think it's dropped.
Okay, dropped. Okay, so maybe what we can do, we wait for her to connect again and allow Karima to finish, to conclude the answer to the colleague from Bangladesh. I think we have more questions. Perhaps we can, while we're waiting for Karima to get back online, we can ask more questions. So Freddie, have you received any more questions from the audience?
Yes, Deborah, we have a question in the chat box asking who will be charged to the next round of budget analysis. Do you feel that the capacities have been built to perform this exercise on a regular basis?
I think I'm gonna. Well, I'll probably answer half, and then maybe Zach can come in and talk about it. I think this is a tech assistant provider. I think the challenges personally can be, providing, being requested to provide support, and then providing support, and then move on to other things. So I guess the contact or the continuous contact, in my experience with technical assistance providers, has been quite specific task and not kind of over a longer term. And somewhere where the Secretariat takes a role in terms of coordinating on a yearly basis with different governments and Somalia in this case. So I don't know what's to come there. And also in terms of the capacity, I was sort of the first step. This was quite a quick analysis with all I would hope that some of the experiences we shared on improving the quality of data and the next steps they could take were informative. I'm sure that this first step enabled had a significant capacity building element for enable kind of this to be done on a regular basis year after year. But that's something I guess that could be planned in based on their own needs. Zach, I want to talk about the role in supporting over different years.
Yeah, I'd love to help trying to answer a piece of that question. This is, in fact, the $1 million question. There are two ways to look at it. The first is the external consultants would come in and focal point on two pieces. Either do the data gathering piece, where you identify everything that could be nutrition related across ministries, and the focal point validates that. But the result, after a TA service provider has supported a country, you have a baseline, the amount of agreed programs that you have found. The baseline is the idea that the exercise should have a applicability piece. You know what you found in year one, you have that baseline to find it in year two. What then? And what we are moving to 3.0 is understanding you can identify many things in a budget analysis. And a lot of country experiences have identified a large number of programs, 60, 70, 80, 150 times more. The assistance that I am now giving countries is to take what comes out of a wider analysis and to focus on a set of programs. One piece of replicability is being able to identify a baseline where TA service providers can be of great help. But if your baseline has too many programs, then you are not going to be able to track it. The countries in the who have been able to year on year reproduce results are countries that have taken broader analysis and refocused as results. For example, when you are able to log into the Spanish webinar tomorrow, you will see that Peru focuses on 13 programs. We can advise countries create sustainable financial tracking systems to use previous results to fine-tune things. For example, World Bank public expenditure reviews are a very in-depth way to look at what every ministry has allocated to nutrition, and expenditure data is found there too. Those studies, a country could never hope to replicate the depth of a personal or public expenditure review. But look at the main ministries that come out of the exercise and say 80% of funding is found in 4 ministries and 13 other ministries make up 20%. So you can use, and you should use, what comes out from a technical service provided exercise to fine-tune, focus, aim small, and miss small. That's my broad sweeping explanation to your question. Use results coming out of a TA supported exercise to refocus to each delegate in the Secretariat of the country's Sun Focal Point office to redo the exercise. Sometimes they need lighter assistance the second time the TA provider is around as well.
Zach, is there any more questions from the audience or any comments on the presentation? Just mute yourself or write it in the chat box.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Kirsten. I have a question to Richard and maybe some of the other presenters. It is that when a donor provides support to nutrition to countries, nutrition is by definition not a sector, and then they provide that support usually to the health sector or to the agricultural sector, and not to multi-sectoral intervention. And that often give problem. For example, the World Bank sometimes give all their money through the Ministry of Health, and when it comes to implementation, it's meant for implementation in agriculture, education, but it's coded belonging to the Ministry of Health. How do you actually deal with that problem when you do budget analysis? Thank you.
In the case of Somalia, so what you can record on a budget, I think, as I sort of outlined before, I think it's very important to be able to specify exactly what the donor-funded project is in the Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Health, and having as much of detail as possible what the outcome, what the purposes of the project. And obviously, some of the ways you can find more details for that project. Obviously, if the project description is very clear within government budgetary documentation, you're able to actually look at the program documents themselves. So obviously, like World Bank has very, very good details about the different projects on their own website, and some of the performance reviews, as well as sort of differed through their website. So you actually understand a lot more about the project itself and some of the sectors where it's, and also more details on some of the outcomes or the intended, and some of the outcomes intended. I think that the more governments can provide on budget to look at aid is obviously a thing. Obviously, management platforms like the one from the Ministry of Planning, which supports and reports very well to, and actually really aid in terms of understanding the different types of aid flows. I think in some other experiences, you can, in more detail, not just some of the aid flows that are reported to the OECD normally, but you can understand some of the other kind of flows from providers or other kind of key funders that you wouldn't necessarily see reported through the OECD, such as through China and other countries. And platforms can also be a good complementary source and aid flows in the country, and more details about what the project is and what the purpose is, rather than just specific ministry. Just go on too long, but just to say, sometimes it's challenging. I think the things around obviously support have become less popular in terms of donors providing funding to pool funding, and obviously challenging understanding if a government or a development partner provides pooled funding or budget support, then it can be difficult to understand, support to the agricultural sector when actually went to nutrition focus. So I think the challenge is project focus can help you understand nations better to nutrition, but actually governments sometimes prefer to have funding to innovate or budget support to help them implement their plans. Then it's up to governments to be able to better report, not just for tracking, but also to help donors understand where their funding is used. So onus on budget support is more on governments to detail the project, what the funding goes towards.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, we can go through a presentation now that Zach from the SAM Secretariat will do on the first comparative nutrition investment database. I'll pull up the presentation. Everyone, just a second for your patience. Zach, you. Do you know when I should change slide? Thank you.
Can you please change the slide now? And thank you so much for everyone's time today. Perfect. So in the next few minutes, I'd like to include a part of this webinar that we have discussed. Accountability, or core values of the Sun movement. These core values in practice is tracking your finances, bringing people together around the results, and being open with what comes out of the exercise. We heard from experiences from Yes and a provider on different parts of how you bring people together to track finances. Next slide, please. The result of this transparency and accountability exercise is to ensure that what comes out of it is publicly available. We designed an online tool that does just that. It also appreciates what the method, supported budget analysis method, does not do. This allows a country with buy-in from stakeholders to determine what they feel is specific and sensitive to nutrition, and to track those on-budget expenditures across time. You will find in the country filters of the tool that you can decide if you want to focus on one country or several. In the example, Guatemala, DRC, and Mauritania are chosen. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. One countries you're interested in looking at, the country filters, an interface built in that allows you to search the information that has come out of this exercise and focus to see exactly what you want. And for you, the imagination is that if you were interested in sanitation-related interventions across Guatemala, and Mauritania, this tool will show you what the governments, which the countries have identified. There are kids with this. This tool was designed to be a mirror for accountability and trust. That local currency is used. A data is also available, which allows you to understand the real-term changes across time and determine exactly what you're interested in. An export feature to save the data, and if you're interested in analysis, putting USD estimates, everything to your fingers. But what you see in this tool is a mirror of what stakeholders in country have come together and agreed on while using the Sun budget analysis method. Many countries have used other methods for tracking financing related to nutrition. We as a movement support whatever a government, a Sun country feels is the best way to track. But the feed into this online tool is only that which has come out of the Sun budget analysis method. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. download the tool. Depending on what you're interested in, you'll also be able to see compare downloadable charts. Of course, that you're not trying to see too much data. If you want to see too many countries and too many interventions, it's impossible to show you that in a graphic form, and you would have to be able to download it. But nonetheless, this tool, mirroring the accountability and trust that we promote in the Sun movement, giving you need at your fingers. Could you please to the next slide? Thank you. And to brief explanation of the online tool webinar, you will have several pieces of information shared with you. The differences across the Sun movement, which you can access on the Sun page. You will have access to the data tool that I've explained to you today. And would you were to be interested in innovative forms of financing, you have access to those links as well. Thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them now.
Anybody has any question for Zach on the investment database, on the tool, on how to use it, or what purpose and etc.? Obviously, you can unmute your microphone.
Hi.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. I just want to let you know that I'm back, Karima. And actually, actually, I missed the whole presentation. Thank you.
No problem, Karima. We will share the presentation after the webinar, and I'll be able to. We will also be happy to walk you through the presentation if you like. Thank you so much for joining us again. I think there was a question that you had just started answering from the Bangladesh. Do you want to perhaps continue if you remember?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Karima.
Yes, actually, he was asking about the sensitive and specific interventions, right? So my answer is in Yemen to differentiate between the sensitive and specific interventions for the focal points. We made it clear that whatever the Ministry of Health is implementing is direct to the patient, so their implementation or their activities and interventions are specific, while the interventions and activities of other sectors like agriculture, education, wash, and so all these sectors are sensitive. So this is how we made it clear between sensitive and specific. Health 3 is specific and the other sectors are sensitive. Then another question, if you don't mind. Yeah. One of the questions I was asked in the chat about the having a memorandum of understanding or code of contact. What we have in Yemen, the question was how to harmonize and avoid the fragmentation of interventions in Yemen. Really, what we have in Yemen is the usual agreements between government and the donors. These agreements, and they highlight the program and the strategic plan that the donors are going to implement in the country, and usually this program or strategic plan are discussed with the government and the relevant ministries, and they go through all the activities and projects in this program. They discuss it one by one, and they make sure that these activities are on the priority of the country. And also, of course, because they have discussed other plans and programs with other donors, they know if there are any duplications and there are any gaps in the on the field. So this discussion helps to avoid duplication and fragmentation of intentions of donors in Yemen. So I think this is a good thing, and this is what we see on ground, that the donors and their implementers like the UN and the GOs are working very well on the ground. We don't see that kind of great duplication or fragmentation. It is okay. There is kind of coordination. For example, for clusters, they have the meetings with each other and they coordinate all the activities with each other. So this helps to not to duplicate and to avoid fragmentation, and also the government donors. So I think this is what we do in the country. Thank you.
Seeing that I think we have a space for a few more questions. Any more questions for Karima or for Richard? One for Zach. So that you need to ask any questions.
So how about we wait
So Zach,
further?
please.
Yeah. Okay. Patricia has another fantastic question. Is there I'm just bringing it up here. Is there data on access and the geography for users? You can imagine this tool that is online is what found across any country that has done the exercise.
I think we have.
Pardon?
And
okay. I believe that was a mistake. That's no worries. To explain, the tool does have the ability to identify allocations across geography. There's a column called Available Subnational Information. Countries, in the way that they can track their public finances, you can't really read the outputs of the exercise unless you've seen it for its geographical components. That would be true of Pakistan's experiences or experiences from Laos. I also wanted to take this very brief moment to let everyone know we will have a French webinar later today where the experiences from Niger and Mali will be presented, as well as ACS experiences supporting Sun countries. I haven't exactly answered your question. Could you please rephrase that, Patricia? And over to you.
I just was wondering if you had already some numbers on how many people have looked at the data and from where.
I can get back to you on those numbers. I know we do have information on who accesses different parts of the website. I don't have that on hand. But we are having a communication strategy to make sure that those who need to know about the tool have access and will have training on it. Training, an FAQ summary, and explaining what they need to know to use the tool to its best effect.
That we have used the database recently to look at investment in agriculture and in other related sectors. So we found it. You have it online. Thank you.
Very happy to hear that. Thank you.
At the end of the presentation, let me just show again just resources on our website. We have the budget analysis resource page. We hope you will be able to access, especially after this webinar, where you will also find information, including guidance documents. Here's the link also of the Companion Nutrition Investment Database that Zach has explained during the presentation, and we would be happy for those of you who are interested to all have calls for more detailed discussions. We're building a number of pages on our website to share information on innovative financing mechanisms. You see the page to our website, as well as links to other websites that you may find useful. And of course, we are building more information on Nutrition for Growth, Nutrition for Growth Summit, Nutrition for Growth commitments. This year is still the year of M4G. We know that the Olympics in Tokyo have been postponed, but we hope that the summit will still go ahead for Nutrition for Growth, which is December 2020. So without further ado, there is one more question, okay, before we close. Freddie, with us?
Yes, we have one more question. How can the budget analysis or the tool be synchronized with the donor's nutrition resource tracking, all for the Nutrition for Growth commitments?
Question. I can try to answer that. Anyone else who would like to contribute? I think it's a very important question. We don't know yet what will be the donor commitments for Nutrition for Growth. We hope, of course, that the summit will create an opportunity for more resources to nutrition, both at global level as well as country level. I think once every country will have their own commitments, both domestic and obviously international development assistance, it's crucial to link those resources and have it part of the national or country financial tracking for nutrition. I don't see any difference in the pledges that were made for Nutrition for Growth versus other commitments or donor resources that have been made through the IDA or through normal international development assistance in a country. So I don't think they should be treated differently. It would be just important to make sure that all these are brought together at the country level when you are looking at how you will be tracking financial resources for nutrition. And the question, we don't know yet, of course, how many resources will be made available at country level after Nutrition for Growth. So it's a bit difficult to know how they will be tracked. But really, these additional resources will be part of donors' internal assistance, as well as, of course, we hope also an increase of domestic resources mobilization. So that will come from the government. That should be easier to track. If you'd like to add anything from your own, so feel free.
I would like to just say one thing on your great explanation. The reality is commitments will be made. Commitments will have a longer time lag. Exactly, their commitments with government commitments will be tracked. It's something that is going to be discussed and understood in 2021. Such results of those commitments will be reported in late 2021 to 2022. Not only do we not know donors' commitments yet, we have an idea of how they will be tracked, but it is a moving process. There is alignment, however, because there is not alignment, then what are we doing here? We understand the need for that alignment and tracking. It's going to be another, provided this pandemic pans out, before that is in a clear and transparent way that we can understand. It is simply too early now to say how that's going to happen, but we understand that it needs to, and so it will.
I think we take the last question from Karima. Is still part of the process? Is that a question you asked? Taking step is still part of the process. The process of collecting information, collecting data, and they're on the call.
Well, that is a question. To explain, traditionally, the budget analysis exercise was called the three-step approach, where weighting was the third step that would be provided. This is no longer recommended, meaning in my discussions with countries, I never suggest that they should go through the weighting process. But in circumstances, weighting can be a meaningful output. It's not something. It is something that should be decided well beforehand. As a rule, no, it is not part of the process. It does not have an analytical value. It does not have an advocacy value necessarily, unless the reasoning for the weighting is, for example, if you weight a program and you go through the third step, you do so to say, we envision that of every dollar spent on this, really 20% is relevant to nutrition. And then the next year you can say we weighted this at 20% because we recognize that we are not having training of staff. So you can use weighting to say what you think the real contribution to nutrition is and work with that to make it more sensitive to nutrition. As a general rule, it is not something that we will recommend plan moving forward.
Okay, I think we can conclude with a comment of Patricia to say that maybe 2021 we will clarify what nutrition sensitive is in a unified way. Thank you, Patricia. I think this is a great comment. We are at the end of this webinar. We want to thank you to all of you for being part of it. We will share in the presentations of this webinar, of the previous webinar this morning, where we had a great presentation from Nepal. And if you have time, do not hesitate to also attend the other presentation in French that we will have this afternoon with the participation, particularly of colleagues from Western and Central Africa, and tomorrow afternoon in Spanish with colleagues from Central and Latin America. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe and healthy. And we hope to talk to you again in, I guess, much happier times for everyone. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon. Bye.